This was a fascinating development today that we're learning that FBI agents launched a pre-dawn raid at the home of President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. It happened 2 weeks ago. Sources say news of the raid took Trump's inner circle by surprise. Let's discuss now. CNN legal analyst Richard Benveniste is here. He's a former chief of the Watergate Task Force. Chris Swecker, the former FBI assistant director for the Criminal Investigative Division. And CNN legal analyst Laura Coates, a former federal prosecutor. I said it was a surprising development because sources tell CNN, Laura, the news that the FBI raid took President Trump and members of his inner circle by surprise and rattled, that was a quote, rattled a few cages. Are the president and his team, are they right to be rattled by this raid?
I would say so, especially because, of course, Manafort was the person who was not a little guy in the campaign. He was the person who headed the campaign for quite some time during the period of time where alleged collusion was alleged to have ramped up at a significant period of time. Remember, the FBI doesn't come do a pre-dawn, no-knock announcement warrant to tell you to have a cup of coffee with them. They're trying to get information and evidence and records that are going to indicate that there has been perhaps a crime committed. Remember, they have to actually go to a federal judge and show probable cause that this person may have evidence that leads to or suggests a crime or an ongoing crime.
Okay, so
they
Laura,
should be
but why a raid in the middle of the night, though? I mean, in the pre-dawn hours. It's all so clandestine. Like, what's going on here?
It is, but it shows two things. Number one, the fact that this is a pre-dawn raid is actually quite normal to have a pre-dawn or an early hour raid for the FBI if they believe the person is going to destroy evidence, if they have prior notice, or if they feel the person's not going to be cooperative and they have evidence that may be fleeting or gone if it's not acquired in a timely fashion. Number two, it also shows you that Muller means business. He does not intend to handle this with kid gloves, does not intend to have this be in front of the cameras with a nice glass of water in front of a congressional hearing. They are trying to investigate the possibility of a crime, and he's being treated like most other people would be treated if they were investigated by the FBI.
Chris, what do you if they're trying, what kind of evidence could he be destroying at this point? I mean, I have to ask you the same question. Why a pre-dawn raid on this man's home?
Sure. Well, this is what a real credible federal investigation should look like. They use the grand jury routinely. They use search warrants. They don't say, "Mother, may I," to some team of attorneys and ask for evidence. They go out and get it. But this is a little bit unusual in a white-collar investigation, and it does tell me that they were able to go to a magistrate, a federal magistrate or a federal judge, and convince them or that person that a crime had been committed. There's probable cause that a crime has been committed, that there's evidence in that location, and there's a distinct possibility that that evidence could be destroyed. That's the only way you get a no-knock search warrant and are able to execute it in that fashion. Usually it's knock and announce. Yeah. And these are mostly done in drug cases.
Interesting. Richard, here's what a spokesman, this is Paul Manafort's response, but it's from a spokesman. Tells CNN that Manafort cooperated with the FBI during the raid. It said FBI agents executed a search warrant at one of Mr. Manafort's residences. Mr. Manafort has consistently cooperated with law enforcement and other serious inquiries, and did so on this occasion as well. So if he's being so forthcoming, I mean, they could have just asked, could have just turned the information over. So why would the FBI need to raid his apartment?
What it tells me is that Bob Mueller must have thought that he was getting jerked around in some way, that either he wasn't getting a straight story from Manafort's attorneys, that either documents were not being forthcoming, that there was foot dragging, or in fact that there were statements that were made that have been shown to be inconsistent with statements of other people.
Therefore, so if it's statements,
it got tough.
Okay. I get what you're saying, but if Mr. Swecker said, Chris said, this usually happens in drug cases. So what are they looking for? Computers, paperwork?
All of the above. Who knows what they might have found? They might have found cash. They might have found papers, statements, computers, any sort of thing. But this is an announcement that it's no more Mr. Nice Guy on the part of Bob Mueller. This is, as Chris said, what is often done in drug cases. It's rare to see it in a white-collar case. So that's what leads me to believe that something unusual must have happened in connection with the normal cooperation that occurs in a white-collar kind of case.
Yeah, so he's sending a message. Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, and if I must say, we talk about cooperation, and Manafort's spokesperson has talked about him being very cooperative. Remember, there are two very distinct probes going on. One is the congressional probe, and one is the criminal probe. He may be very cooperative with the Senate Intelligence Committee or the House Committee as well, but that doesn't mean that he's cooperating with the criminal probe. And to Ben's point, the idea that he may be jerking the person around or may not be forthcoming in that context, the FBI cannot operate and cannot function as the chief investigating agency of the United States government if they are just on a trust and wink and nod basis. They must be skeptical. They must try to figure out if they have all the information they want. Cooperation is not enough. They need all of the information in an information gathering inquiry just like this.
Okay. Back now with my panel, we're talking about that pre-dawn raid at Paul Manafort's house, a former Trump campaign chairman. So I was asking you, Chris, just quickly, so they should be worried, right?
Well, I'd say no if they've done nothing illegal.
All right, good answer. Okay, so let me ask you this. My next question is, could the FBI, could they be trying to flip Manafort by using these tactics? Chris, you say yes?
I think that's a very common tactic. It indicates seriousness, and as Richard said, he could have been jerking them around a little bit, and they may have even tried to use a subpoena to get the information. So the short answer to that is yes.
Laura, flip him or someone close to him?
Absolutely. He is one of the people who has tangential issues that are financial in matter, that are unrelated to the Russian investigation, that could be used as leverage to get him to cooperate for future targets. Absolutely.
What do you think about that, Richard? Because someone close to him, who might that be? Who could that be?
Well, he's up there near the top of the food chain in terms of dealing with the Russians. Look, Donald Trump has publicly talked about the use of pardons. And when you think about that, the idea of pardoning somebody in this investigation without there been any charges levied at all yet, and calling the investigation fake news and a witch hunt, this is the same kind of thing that Richard Nixon did secretly when he offered clemency to some of the Watergate burglars. So when you talk about pardoning, you're getting the attention of the FBI and the investigators in a way that is inconsistent with letting the investigation go on toward a conclusion based on fact.
Let me ask you this. Paul Manafort was the campaign manager at the time of Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russians. I mean, could the need for this raid have sprung from that meeting, Chris?
I think that information that was in that email string is probably the first concrete information that I've seen that states the Russian government had an interest in the Trump campaign and helping him. So yes, I think it forms some of the building blocks for the probable cause affidavit that supported that search warrant.
Laura, the Trump administration isn't taking any of this lightly. So the New York Times reports that they have spent time digging into the history of Mueller's team, unearthing details about political donations that they've made. Do you think Trump's attempts to discredit Mueller and his team will have any impact on this investigation at all?
I think it will have an impact perhaps in the political circles to figure out whether or not the president is trying to distract from the issues. But I think ultimately in the investigation, in the legal context, it will have very little to do with the investigation. Mueller's financial disclosures have already been made by the Department of Justice along with other parts of his team, and doesn't indicate anything nefarious or unethical in there. So really, if anything, it shows that there is a paranoia that continues to grow, and paranoia invites further speculation and further detailed investigation.
But what if he tries to fire Mueller? I mean, what happens then? Because he's already said, there was a red line. Don't cross a line by looking into his finances.
Well, this red line is a figment of the president's imagination. It's got nothing at all to do with the legitimacy of the investigation. Of course, if there is a motive that is financial, that is behind this argument about collusion, then it should be fully investigated. There's nothing of the sort that is off limits. Talking about a red line only demonstrates that there is something that the president is very concerned not be made public.
Yeah, Laura, I know you want to weigh in, but I got to go. Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. When we come back, North Korea